Okay, so today, as we continue on, we did our introduction to Titus. We're in Titus, right? So we did our introduction to Titus, the to and the from. You know, this is to Titus from Paul. There's a little more to it than that, but we got through that. Now we're moving on to the next part, which is basically, I guess you could call the purpose of the whole letter. Titus is a book that isn't very long. It's only got 3 chapters. Of course, we don't chapter and verse the letters that are written to us. We do that for our benefit here in the Bible so that we can find things easier, be able to know the address to things. But we knew from the beginning of the to and the from that this letter that Paul wrote to Titus, to the people of Crete, remember that's where he's at right now. Titus is on the island of Crete, and he is trying to help set up the church there and get it all, up and running and organized and all that kind of good stuff. Paul sent him there to be able to do that. And Paul is writing to him to kind of encourage him and direct him, but we also know that he is very much aware of the fact that this letter will be read before the congregation. So he not only addresses the ideas and the purposes of it to Titus, but also so that all the people that hear it will know what it's about and what their part or what their role is in it as well. So this next part, what we're doing here, Titus 1, 5 through 9. That's where we're at. Titus chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. This chunk is what we're going to talk about. Last time we talked about verse 5, which kind of gave us the purpose, I guess you could say, of what we're doing here. The title that I kind of gave this little section, verses 5 through 9, was Order and Elders. And that's kind of what he's there to do. That's what he's telling Titus that needs to be done. Now, remember, quick history lesson. Paul was traveling through. He was incarcerated. He was on his way to Rome. They landed on the island of Crete, and while they were there, they must have, the people that had him under arrest must have allowed him to go out and kind of spread the word a little bit to the people living on the island. So he goes and he does that, but he's not able to stay there very long because when they want to leave, he's got to go with them. So when he leaves, he then still feels for the people of Crete. So he sends Titus there to kind of help pick up the pieces of what he started. And what he hopefully is doing is what is told to us in verse 5. It says, "For this reason I left you in Crete." That's why, of course, Paul's talking to Titus. He goes, "For this reason I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things which are lacking." Okay, so you got to get things all organized there. All right, and then appoint elders in every city as I commanded you. So the concept is you got to kind of get things organized for these people, and then get people to run it. Is basically what he's saying there. I got an itchy eye. Is basically kind of what we looked at first off. Now the importance of picking the right person is a big deal, and that's kind of the part that we're going to talk about now, and it's going to sound a whole lot like what we talked about in 1 Timothy. Okay, when we did our study in 1 Timothy, we're going to see a lot of the same words, a lot of the same concepts that we talked about in 1 Timothy that Paul talks about to Titus. That's why we did the study in 1 Timothy, then 2 Timothy, and then Titus, because all 3 of them have kind of a similar theme or a similar wordage or verbiage that's used there. Okay? So, with that, he says in verse 5, I left you in Crete there. This is the reason I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things which are lacking and appoint elders in every city as I commanded you. Verse 6, this is where we're picking up right here. It says, if a man is blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of dissipation or insubordination. Okay, stop right there. Here we see that as he's moving in, if you remember last time, when we were in verse, we were in verse 5, that's where we were. It says, for this reason, I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things which are lacking and appoint elders. Remember I talked to you about that word elders last time. That word elders, there's basically two different words that Paul uses for that description of somebody in charge, somebody like an elder. There are two that he uses most often. He kind of uses these two words interchangeably. If you read some of, Paul wrote at least 14 of the books in the New Testament. So if you read through them, you'll see him kind of interchange these two words a lot when he's talking about somebody in leadership, right? The word that he used in verse 5 that we talked about is an elder. An elder as being somebody who is maybe an older man, somebody who's maybe wise, maybe somebody who's got some experience, that type of thing, right? The other word that he uses, which he kind of uses interchangeably, is a different word, and it has a different meaning. It's where we actually get our word bishop. Okay? It's where we get our word bishop. And we're going to see that word used in verse 7. Okay? So what he's talking about here is this elder or this bishop, somebody in this leadership role, because that's what he just told him that needs to be done. First order of business, got to get things organized. Second thing, you got to get some leaders to help run it. Now, since this is the twofold purpose, we don't see a lot of the whole organizational structure. He doesn't get out there and say, okay, you need to do this and this and this and this to get it organized. Go get this building, call it this name, do this right here. He doesn't do that thing because every place is different, right? Every place is different. I've been the pastor of several different churches. Each one is different based off of the people that go there, the community of the people that the church is in, the needs of the congregation. Everything's a little different, right? So you can't just kind of do a cookie-cutter church, so to speak, right? Sure that there's certain organizational things that go on there, but he doesn't really focus on that. He more focuses on the leadership that will be helping perpetuate the churches or that get started. So that's how he kind of leads right into it. He kind of jumps right into that eldership or that bishop, that leadership role. So he jumps in there and he says, if a man, if a man is blameless, well, let me back up. I might have said this last time. We need to, as a church, and I might even extend that out further, us as a nation, but us definitely as a church, us as the body of Christ, we need to make sure that we are seeking people that have the right kind of qualities for the job. Okay? And that sounds silly because of course that's what you want to do. If you're trying to hire somebody who's a good cook and their previous job was changing tires, that's probably not your guy, right? You know what I mean? And vice versa. If you're looking for a guy to change tires and all he knows how to do is fillet fish, then that's probably not your guy, right? And I say that because the world really focuses on that, right? The world really focuses on that. The world really wants a dynamic resume that demonstrates a proven track record of success. Corporations want shrewd businessmen that can do, make the hard calls and do what needs to be done to make the shareholder stock go high, and it wants to have, somebody with charisma, salespeople want somebody with great charisma that can, sell, a ketchup popsicle to a guy wearing white gloves, you know what I mean? Just who wants that guy that can just really... In contrast to that, along the same lines per se, but in contrast to that, a church needs somebody who is not just a leader, but a servant leader, somebody who's willing to go and bear the qualities that they're trying to get. Okay? In the business world, for many, many years I was in the business world, the secular business world, and it's cutthroat just like everything else, If you want to get ahead, you got to make yourself look good, and sometimes the best way to do that is make somebody else look bad. Yep, that's the way you do it. If I want to elevate my stock, I got to make yours plummet. so that I can show value in myself that's greater than somebody else, so that I will be able to take that job. And then once I have that job, I have to make sure that everybody else's looks bad and I look the best. It's a perpetual thing that's kind of awful, really. It's kind of sad, right? But when it comes to church leadership, the church needs somebody that conforms to a different standard. Okay? The church needs a servant leader with the same kind of qualities that Jesus showed when he was here. You know what I mean? He never came in and was cutthroat. He was literally God, right? And it wasn't until the week before he was crucified that he actually presented himself as Christ, as the Messiah, right? The whole time he was here, he started his ministry when he was like 33, in his 30s, and only went 3 years, I should say. He started when he was in his 30s, only went like 3 years before they actually put him to death. Because he spoke with power and authority, and that power and authority was in contrast to what the world would have, right? So if he is that influential and he is that powerful because he is God and he has that righteousness and that perfection that he perspective in which he comes, then it makes all the sense in the world that you'd want to exemplify those kind of character traits, right? You'd want to look at what he's doing. A godly leader should be that kind of person, somebody who looks out beyond themselves. Godly leaders should model grace, extend mercy, demonstrate compassion, exude joy, cultivate atmosphere of peace, encourage the participation of other people to use their gifts for the benefit of all. And most importantly, they need to be somebody who looks beyond themselves, somebody who's interested in helping those around them, thinking of them first and themselves second. All right. Now it sounds great, but these kind of people are kind of rare. You know what I mean? And not everybody is perfect. Even somebody who may start off the gate really strong sometimes happens. I know as I get a little older, I'm getting closer and closer to that get off my lawn guy. And that type of thing. But I need to try and continue to keep myself in an educational process in the Lord, so that I will keep myself on track of where I need to be, instead of throwing things at the neighbor kids. So, Paul describes this kind of person, and when he describes this kind of person, he literally, like we saw in 1 Timothy, he uses like 15 different descriptors, okay? 15 different descriptors of what this guy is going to look like, or what this guy might be able to do for you, okay? And he uses this reference based off of the example that God has shown us through Christ, right? So this is where we're at right here. And I say this because I think it's really important for us to not just breeze over them. If you're looking at all 15 things of this, you're going to go, yeah, this guy doesn't exist. Well, I got news for you. He doesn't. All right? He doesn't exist. But it's the mindfulness of these things and the care in which you try to get those things in your own life. If this is what you try to do in your own life, it will elevate your stock naturally. It doesn't mean that you're making others look bad. You're only doing what God would have you to do, and that alone is going to gain you value with God. All right? And it's also going to gain value with other people. Think about how many people you know that you would go to for advice. Is the guy who always tells you that you're an idiot and that you shouldn't do things, is that the guy you go for advice to all the time? Or is it the person you know that's a great listener? Somebody who's compassionate, somebody who gives, who exudes kind of joy and positivity, right? Those are kind of the people that we gravitate to, right? Not, that type of a thing. Well, there's a reason for that, It's a simple reason, because nobody wins a fight, or nobody changes their mind by losing a fight, all right? It just doesn't happen that way. Nobody just goes, well, you're an idiot. Well, you smell. Well, you stink. Well, you're mom. And this is, oh, okay. Well, I get it. Okay, I'll do that. That never happens. Okay? Never happens. So, let's get to where we're at right here. Verse 6. He goes right into what an elder, what this bishop is going to look like. We know that it's going to be a bishop because we see that very same word in verse 7, but he already led into it a little bit with that word elder in the previous verse. So, he says, appoint elders in the city as I commanded you. If a man is, first off, what? Blameless. Okay? Blameless. This means somebody who's above reproach, somebody who is without accusation. Okay? This is not this is not talking about somebody who is perfect or somebody who is without sin, because that person doesn't exist, right? But this is somebody who is being described as someone who has a general level of maturity towards what they do. Okay? A general level of maturity and about their reputation too. Nobody's perfect. Okay? Let me jump on my soapbox for a second here. This whole woke culture irritates the living tar out of me, because you see people that are maybe in positions of influence now, actors or something like that, and they're nice guys, they're nice people, but they feel the need to have to go before, the general populace and apologize for something they did 20 years ago when they were first trying to become an actor, and whatever, maybe they said something wrong or wore the wrong thing, and they're afraid that people are going to drudge that up and use it against them. So they go back. Man, if I was going to sit here and apologize for all the things I did when I was 20 years old, oh my goodness, we'd be here a while, okay? There's levels of stupidity that I had when I was younger that shock even myself, okay? And I know I'm not alone in that, all right? So here we're not talking about perfection, because nobody's got that, right? What we're talking about here is someone who is above reproach, someone who is blameless, someone who is above accusation, somebody who, because of their reputation, because of their character, people would look at them and go, yeah, I don't think that's true about them, right? Somebody says, oh, they're probably a bad person. And they'd go, no, I don't think they would be. Because of their character, because of their reputation, because of the maturity in which they conduct themselves. They are, let me get here. What am I throwing out there? Verse 6. All right. We'll start with blameless. Now, this blameless is kind of important. All right? Because as you read through these, you're going to see a list of like 17, 18 different things. And I said that there was only 15 things. Well, that's because there are like subcategories to what he says, which is kind of crazy. Because he really wants to get, once again, if the Bible tells us something, it's important, right? If stress or emphasis is put on it by repeating it over and over again, or giving it in detail, then it obviously must be very important. If he says, be a nice guy, that's probably important. But if he says, be a nice guy by not murdering people, not stealing from people, not doing, if he gives more detail, then that gives you a wonderful tool to use. If he says, don't be a bad person, well, that's great. I think we all want that. We don't want to be bad people. But how do I do that? But if he goes into some more detail, whoa, that's helpful. Because then it gives you a starting point. It gives you a structure that you can kind of live by. So more information isn't bad. More information is actually productive in how you can live your life. So here we go into the first one, blameless. Okay? You got to look at somebody's natural maturity and their reputation. All right? We'll put maturity and rep. I'm going to put rep because I'm going to run reputation. Okay? That's what I'm going to put right there. All right? So that's what that means. Okay. This is about the framework of their character. Now, the reason why I tell you this is because this blameless, the first thing he says here, he goes in and he says, appoint elders in every city as I commanded if a man is blameless. I think that word blameless is kind of the setup for everything you're going to hear after that. Because blameless is pretty broad. Blameless is talking about somebody who has a sense of maturity, a good reputation, somebody who is framed themselves with the character of God, I guess you could say, right? And I think that's kind of an overview of everything else that's listed after that, because blameless is a little broad, but now we're going to see it kind of drill down a little bit. And as you see it drill down, you're going to actually see that what we're going to look at is divided into 3 subcategories. I know this is crazy, but when you read in the Bible, if I've taught you nothing, or if I've shared with you nothing, is that the Bible has immense structure to it and purpose. You read it, just by reading it first through, you go, wow, that's powerful. And as you get into it and really look at it, you see that it has immense structure and purpose to it. So if you have that immense structure and purpose to it, man, it must have dimensions that you haven't even begun to scratch. And this is no different. As we go into this general quality, I guess you could say, of being blameless, of having this wonderful character, it's divided into 3 subcategories, and that's home life, public life, and church life. Okay? These 3 subcategories. It's the home life, public life, and church life. Now, those 3 subcategories are the same 3 subcategories that we saw in 1 Timothy, if you remember, if you were there during that study. You're going to see these same things. It's not just it's how I am personally, it's how I am publicly, and it's how I am with the church, and how I am publicly should directly affect the other 2. How I am publicly should show how I feel personally and how I act in the church, and how I act in the church should be a direct reflection of how I feel and how I act when I'm not at church. So all 3 of these things interact with each other, but these 3 things, these 3 subcategories, I guess you could say, are very important. That's where we get to the next one. It says, if a man is blameless and the husband of one wife, this Greek reads literally a one-woman man. If you were to look this up, it says the husband of one wife. What this means, what the Greek literally renders a one-woman man. All right, a one-woman man. At the most basic level, this describes a man who is married to just one woman and continues to live in fidelity and harmony with that same woman. That's what it's about. Okay? Do they have to be married? That's a whole nother discussion. But it's saying, is this person the husband of one wife, or he's a one-woman man? So does he have one woman, then he has, mistress on the side or something like that? You know what I mean? If he is committed to this one woman, or is he committed to himself, is basically the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about here. Okay? When you have a marriage ceremony, you stand up. You need to pay attention next time you go to a marriage service. You need to pay attention, because you stand up, it's all about the dress and the cake and all this other stuff. What you're doing is you're standing up before God and witnesses, professing your commitment to God first and each other, and committing to stay in that relationship with those 3 people together for the rest of your days. That's what you're doing, okay? And what you're doing is you're coming before the General Assembly saying, this is my commitment. I'm committing myself to God and to my wife for the rest of my life, and you guys hold me accountable to it. That's what you're doing, okay? A lot of people don't necessarily think of it that way. They always had that caveat during a a church service that nobody ever likes. If anyone here sees a reason why these two should not be wed, I don't ever say that. When I marry somebody, if you haven't said something by now, this ain't the time, buddy. All right? If you haven't said something by now, this ain't the time. Okay? But what you're doing is you're coming before the people and you're going, this is my commitment. I'm coming before God saying, God, I'm committed to you and I'm committed to this person. And you're going for the General Assembly and go, I'm committed to God and this other person, you guys keep an eye on me and hold me accountable. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing during a marriage ceremony. And when you're sitting there watching the marriage ceremony, you're accepting that responsibility. That's another piece of the puzzle. Here we see that you're a one-woman guy. And the reason why you need to be a one-woman guy is because of your reputation and your maturity. You've decided to be that one-woman guy, and you want to make sure that you have a good reputation amongst people because you're a one-woman guy. People will look at you and go, yeah, this guy's devoted to his family. You know what I mean? He's devoted to his family.
Was that a common thing to have more than one wife back then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a big deal back then.
I'm not too big on sharing.
Yeah. Back then, it was a big deal. At the time of Ruth, man, how many wives? When Ruth became, how many wives did he have? He had like a whole harem of wives. I can't remember. I want to say in the hundreds.
Men were crazy back then.
They were crazy back then.
Well,
like you know,
I've heard, Pastor Tony, and you've even mentioned it too, but I mean, even so many hundreds of wives and then concubines.
oh yeah, and then concubines too.
All of these hundreds and thousands of concubines. I mean, wouldn't that be considered, a wife or?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. And the silly part about it is that not only do you have more than one wife, and you have more than one concubines, you probably live all together. They're all your concubines live probably together, and all your wives probably live together, and they have to learn how to get along with each other. And I can barely handle. I just won't even say it. I won't even say it. But
stretching.
But the reason I say that is because I'm committed to that one individual, okay? And it's my desire to do everything I can for that one person, right? The idea of having more than one wife and having more than one concubine is like going out and buying a pair of shoes. Well, these shoes are cool. You buy these shoes because you wanted to wear them for one day or for a specific function. That function's over now, and these shoes are cool too, And once you accumulate these shoes, what do you do with them? Well, you keep them in your closet until you need them, and the thing, some people will go in their closet and go, man, I have nothing to wear in here.
Get another pair of shoes.
Yeah. You kidding me? Yeah, sew all your shoes together. You can wear a shoe dress. But no, I mean that kind of a mentality. You know what I mean? So as opposed to that, because we're looking for maturity and reputation, you're a one-woman man. Okay? Does that mean that we have that whole thing about divorce and all that kind of stuff? We're talking about being committed in the relationship in which you currently possess. Okay? Being committed in the relationship you currently possess. Okay? Not all things. I got a buddy of mine. I got lots of friends. It seems like it's an awful thing, but I could rattle off at least half a dozen names of people in ministry, even, that their wives have left them because the grass is greener on the other side. I had a buddy of mine once that came and I went to college with, and he was a speaker at the camp I had in California. And I went and I picked him up from the airport, and we drove down to the camp, and we were talking and catching up and stuff like that. We went to camp all week, had a great time. By the time he got back to his house where he lived in another state, and he flew back, his wife was gone with all of her stuff, and left him a note saying, I'm leaving you. Like, while he's gone doing ministry, she up and leaves him. I was like, dude, wow. You know, that's something. Is that a direct reflection of him or her? We don't know. You know what I mean? We don't know. It's, you know, just, it is what it is. So, the commitment that's talked about here is about being a one-woman man of the relationship that you currently possess. Okay? There's a lot of, like, the next thing that we're going to talk about is children. And I think this is important for you to recognize, is that when it talks about children, the only reason why I talk about, like, divorce and stuff like that is because here it talks about being the husband of one wife, and then the next thing it talks about is having believing children. That word children is described in the plural and not in the singular. And why is that important? Because it's talking about the kids in general. Like, you know, everybody's got, you know, sometimes, well, not everybody. Many people you know of that has multiple kids. One of them maybe isn't the committed one. You know what I mean? Maybe you've got that one wayward child. You know what I mean? Well, they use the word children in plural, giving the idea of the whole of your household. Okay? Because, you know, some may rebel for a time and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Because there is no such thing as perfection. And you're not looking for that perfection. What you're looking for is the whole of what's being talked about, right? So when it comes to a husband of one wife, that's very specific. That's talking about a one-woman man, as in the concept of singular, not plural. It's not talking about, if it was talking about plural, it'd be talking about potentially multiple wives or concubines or something like that, but it doesn't. It talks about it in a plural sense. So that, to me, tells me that we're talking about the relationship in which you possess, okay, currently. And then it moves on to children, talking about them plurally, as in the context of the family, all right? Does that make sense? Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on that? Or questions? I bring that up because I think it's important. Because sometimes that weighs on people. And I don't want it to weigh on people. I want us to be able to look at it and understand what's being said here. The complexities that we know of today were not, they had them back then too. You know, probably even worse, and to some degrees, with all the weddings and, you know, having multiple wives and concubines and all this other stuff. It might have been a little different. The only time you see that now is some compound where they're having some cold or something. Don't drink the punch. So anyway, let's move on. Or do I have time to move on? What time is it? Is it 10:30? Oh, it's 10:30. Okay. Just in quick, I will say that. It says, blameless, husband of one wife, having faithful children. Okay, that concept of faithful children. We'll go into the other two things that are said there, but that faithful children is the concept in which we're talking about. That Greek word that's used there as child implies, it does not imply a particular range. It implies kids that are basically under the same household, basically, or under the same protection. You know, when your kids get older and they move out, they go marry, you know, get married on their own and stuff like that, then they're responsible for themselves, right? Well, this is kind of this concept of child, this Greek word that's used there, doesn't necessarily imply an age range, but it does have the mindset of people that are basically under, you know, kids that are under your roof, under your authority type of a thing. And it uses that phrase in the plural sense, talking about your kids in general. Okay? Talking about your kids in general. Because once again, you know, sometimes some go astray for a while and that type of thing, and that doesn't disqualify you because you've got a prodigal son. It's more about your ability to present yourself to your family and do that, okay? We'll talk about the stability of that next week. But I just wanted to have that contrast, tell you that contrast of the one-woman man versus the children, talking about the broad sense of the household under your authority, okay? If they get out of your authority and they're doing crazy things, that's not going to disqualify you because you've got a prodigal son type of a thing. You get that kind of meaning, okay? Any thoughts about that? Comments?
I want to do the. One woman man, and we'll get to the kids. We'll get to the kids there. Child.
We'll get to that later. Anybody have any thoughts, comments? Anything like that? Okay, right on. Let's pray, and we'll be done with this. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this time that we could gather together here, and we could just open up your word and look at it and understand what's being said to us, and know the implications of it. Dear Lord, this concept of being someone, an elder or a bishop or someone in a leadership position is telling us, it's basically giving us a job description, so to speak. Knowing that there is nobody that 100% fills that position. But it gives us a framework of which we can look towards somebody and also help develop them, and the individual can also learn to develop themselves into that kind of leadership role. So, dear Lord, thank you for giving us that instruction. It isn't just a man should be blameless and then that's it. There's more to it than that, and that kind of extensive instruction gives us something to shoot for, gives us something to build to, gives us something to grow into, knowing that we're building our maturity and our spiritual maturity and our reputation amongst men. So, dear Lord, just bless us to be able to open our hearts and minds to this, knowing that it's there. All this is here to give us instruction on how we can live that Christ-like lifestyle that you would have us to live. So, dear Lord, bless this time. Help us to just open our hearts to it, and just be with each one of us as we go into our church service, that we may be able to honor and glorify you in all that we do. We ask it in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Can you hit the stop? Thank you.